Hello and welcome to Las Vegas. So how many of you are refugees from the polar vortex? Well, thanks for bringing it with us. Snow on the mountains in Las Vegas, pretty incredible. Love to see that water. My name is Kim Shanahan. I am a 32-year builder in Santa Fe, New Mexico. In 2008, after the collapse of our industry, I became the executive officer of the Santa Fe Area Home Builders Association, where we are considered the most radical chapter in America of the 700 or so in the Federation. As a matter of fact, Mr. Ron Jones was a member of my association so he could keep his status active with NAHB. And when I stepped down from that position at the end of November, I think Ron is also going to abandon any formal relationship with the National Association of Home Builders as well. Ron, of course, has been a mentor of mine for many years. I've met him because he was a New Mexico builder, and also met him because he was putting on, with a few other folks who are here in the audience, the very first National Green Building Conference up in Denver, Colorado, like in 1999, 20 years ago. And so we've been at this for quite some time in terms of sustainability. I will also say that so many of us back in the day, when we moved out to the western United States, and I did in 1986, we were in an era of no growth. That was what us 30-somethings all believed was essential. Many of us read Edward Abbey and John Nichols and Desert Solitaire and things like that. And many of us believed that the very famous quote that Edward Abbey is attributed to, which is the growth for the sake of growth is the ideology of a cancer cell. Growth for the sake of growth is the ideology of a cancer cell. And so we had no growth, folks, of my generation. We evolved into smart growth. We evolved into sustainable growth. But we recognize that growth is not something that we can stop. As a matter of fact, here in the Southwest, the only known phenomena that will actually stop growth or slow growth is making everything more expensive. So we've seen communities like Aspen, and even to a certain extent in Santa Fe, New Mexico, where because they're expensive to live, growth has been relatively sustainable. In Santa Fe, about 1% a year, and about 1% a year for almost 100 years or so. But there is something that can stop growth. And the fact is that people want to move to the Southwest. As a matter of fact, those of you from the polar vortex very well may be dreaming about someday moving to a nice warm clime and enjoying your later years in a beautiful, sunny, dry place, which we are. If we don't have water, that will stop growth. As a matter of fact, in Santa Fe, New Mexico, some 20 years or so ago, we'll see a slide about this, we were facing building moratoriums. We had determined that we didn't have enough growth to sustain ourselves, or rather enough water to sustain ourselves for the growth that we had, which was only 1% a year. Water can stop growth, but it doesn't stop people from moving. As a matter of fact, there are 80-some million baby boomers. Economists from the National Association of Home Builders say that typically 12% of retirees move somewhere. So that's 10 million people. 10 million people who are part of my generation who very likely will say, let's pick up and get out of Minnesota or Michigan or Illinois and let's go down to the Southwest. So they're coming. They're absolutely coming. And so what do we do? How do we accommodate that growth? One of the things that I've talked about in the last couple of years is this notion of a sustainability failure point. What is your community's sustainability failure point here in the Southwest? And that point is a date in time. And that date is when growth comes this way and water resources come this way. And at some point in time, our governing bodies can legitimately say, there are no more permits. There are no more building permits because we simply cannot accommodate these folks coming in as we diminish our water resources. So I believe that the home builders need to lead the way on net zero water. Santa Fe, New Mexico gets about 12 inches of rain per year. We build, and have been building for the last couple of years, some net zero water homes that are completely off the grid, capturing roof water, which is the clean stuff, putting it in our tanks, putting it back in our houses through purple pipe. We treat it, we filter it, run it through UV lights, and we can drink it. So to the extent that we can actually start to promote these kinds of technologies means that we can push back our sustainability failure point further. And we can continue to build for those who are going to show up here in the Southwest. So Sarah Gutterman has a great article in our Green Builder, or in our program guide about 100, the phenomena of a 100. And one of the significant 100s that we talk about and have been for some time about energy efficiency is this thing called a HER score, a 0 to 100 scale, where 0 is net zero energy. Well, we can have that same kind of phenomena with water. But it's not going to be market driven. Water's too cheap. You'll see in Santa Fe right there, we have some of the highest water rates in the United States. That has actually helped us reduce our gallons per capita per day significantly. We're probably the lowest in the West right now. Here in Las Vegas, they've done amazing things with water conservation, but they're still at about 200 gallons per capita per day. And we are in Santa Fe, we're down to 87 now. How did we get there? We'll talk about that as we go along. But the point being is that even at $154 a month, by the way, the gallons per capita today is not what we use particularly in our homes. It's everything that the public water supply supplies to us in Santa Fe. So it's our hotels, it's our restaurants, it's some of the golf courses, it's what we use in our homes and our lawns. But still down to 87 gallons per capita per day. Las Vegas is about 200. It's too cheap. It's too cheap to be market driven. When the HERS and ResNet came along, they knew that if you could chop your energy bill in half, you could significantly reduce the cost of what it is to live in your home. And it would pay for itself. The things that you could do would pay for themselves, including solar panels and lots of other things. Water is not that way. Capturing, treating, and putting water back in your house is pretty expensive. And there certainly is no market drivers that will induce the consumers to do that. And so as General Clark said earlier this morning, we count on our governments to do things that help us, including building codes. And so that very well may be what we have faced with, is that here in the Southwest, that for the sake of our building industry, we very well may need to be embracing water conservation codes as opposed to fighting them or believing that these are all going to be market-driven solutions. The West will grow, and its people use the most water. This is a graph or a map that shows how much domestic water use, gallons a day per person. And you can see that the darker blues and the darker greens are in the western United States. And you may not be able to see some of the figures that are on those individuals, but here in Nevada, by 2030, expecting 114% growth. 60% Texas, 109 in Arizona, 27% in California, 35 in Colorado. So we're growing, and we already use the most water per capita per day. As we look at some of these maps, I think it's important for us also to recognize this state right here, Colorado. And the reason is because Colorado is where all of our water comes from that goes this way on the Continental Divide and the Colorado River Basin, and it goes this way on the other side of the Continental Divide through New Mexico down into Texas. So everything here in the Southwest is depending on the water that comes into those mountains. Whether it's from stream flows or from the aquifer, it's all right there. We are in a mega drought. Jonathan Overpeck, a professor at University of New Mexico, or excuse me, University of Michigan, has done a great deal of research and he was a Nobel Prize recipient with the IPCC back when they handed that out to the IPCC. But he studied the Colorado River Basin pretty extensively. And we have had droughts in the past. And a mega drought is considered a drought that lasts for 20 years or more. The last big one we had in the late 50s and 60s was a drought that occurred because of a 20-year cycle of very, very little precipitation. Standard kinds of droughts, if you will. The drought that we are in right now, and we are entering the 20th year, is based on temperature. Temperature is what is causing the drought that we are faced with now in the Southwest. And what temperature does is it rises. It makes that snowpack that we may get actually very often evaporate, transpire before it actually even melts. It doesn't even come down to our streams or our aquifer, it just goes back up into the air. So we are facing a temperature drought, and it's still going on in 2019, and we honestly don't know where it's going to end. And it very well may not end. As we heard earlier today, it's getting worse in terms of climate change and heat. And so it's very likely that this drought that we are now in almost the 20th year has no foreseeable end. So who uses water? Everybody does, all kinds of industries and whatnot. This is a little probably hard to read, but I think you can see the colors. Purple, the purple bar, which is the one that's kind of down there, not the lowest, but the second lowest. The purple bar is public supply, what we deliver to our homes and our businesses and so on, what the water systems deliver to us. The purple one, not very much. You can see it's down here. And it's risen a little bit with population, kind of starting to go down as we start to see a little more conservative, but it's not the big one. And for many years, I thought irrigation and farmland, especially here in the Southwest, were the biggest consumers of the water. They are big. That's green. A lot of water being used in irrigation. The biggest one, though, is that gold one, and that is thermoelectric power. So the energy-water nexus is very, very real, very real. We certainly see that here in Las Vegas, where the lights never go off. It takes a great deal of water to create electricity. And conversely, it takes a great deal of water to deal with water here in the Southwest, primarily, which is pumped out of the aquifers for the most part. So water and producing and delivering water to us is a huge electrical consumption, and electric itself is using a great deal of water to be produced. Who uses the most? Well, obviously the states with the largest populations do. California and Texas. That's the total withdrawals in 2015. Again, all of that water that they use in Southern California and Texas is coming out of that Colorado area, either one side of the Continental Divide or the other. We grow a lot of food out here in the Southwest, probably maybe inappropriately, and we do it through irrigation. And you can see that the eastern side of the Mississippi River is the light-colored ones where they get rain. And so they don't have to pull it out of the aquifer or divert it from streams to do the growing of food that we need. So it's a big consumer for sure. We also, because so many of us have moved here from those wet states, for many years we thought, well, you know, let's green up the desert. The desert shall bloom. And we put turf grass in, and we put deciduous trees in, and we try to replicate our former lives back in the green areas that we may have come from. So we use a lot of water just going into that domestic area. What's interesting about this is total withdrawals for domestic use. And you can see it's, you know, different states have different colors. But the reality is we all shower in the same length of time. We all go to the bathroom about the same amount of times per day. And so the indoor use of water is pretty consistent across the United States. whether you're from Minnesota or you're from Arizona. We pretty much use the same amount of water indoors, no matter what. So it's an outdoor phenomena that is driving the West and the Southwest. We pull it from every stream. These are surface water withdrawals. Again, California and Texas, obviously, they've got a much larger population, so they're going to be the dark blue states. But again, you can see that this withdrawal of water is pretty well concentrated on the West. Groundwater withdrawals. They call it fossil water, mainly because we pull water out of our aquifers, and it's true that our streams do recharge our aquifers, but not anywhere near at the rate that we withdraw. And so that fossilized water has, just like peak oil, it's got a point where you can't drill a well deep enough. I know in New Mexico, the last few years, we've had many, many rural wells go dry, not deep enough. And if you are a senior on a fixed income and you cannot afford another $25,000 for a well, you're kind of screwed. You can't really just pull the casing out and drill a deeper hole. You got to start all over again. So Santa Fe. We, as I said, are down to about 87 gallons per capita per day. We also have been at this for a while. What this chart is showing you is how many acre feet of water we were at one time. And I must say that this chart is not looking how I remembered it. It's changed a little bit here in this PowerPoint. But on the left-hand side, at one point in time in 1995, when we had our pretty good crisis with water, we were using about 14,000 acre feet per year as a delivery, 14,000 acre feet. Compare that to Las Vegas, which is, I don't know, 300,000 acre feet that they get. But Santa Fe was 14,000. We realized that we had an issue, and so we were faced with two choices politically. One was to theoretically allocate 100 acre feet or more per year for new growth. That would have been 500 or 600 dwelling units per year, which is kind of what we were doing. Or we could do something much more radical, which is what we did. And we created what we call an offset principle. And that is that no new homes and no new businesses can come and get a permit unless they can show that they will have no net increased demand on the aggregate supply. So we have been at net zero water as a home building community in Santa Fe, even without doing anything inside the house. And the reason we did that is because that was the only way we were going to avoid the moratorium. The home builders at the time said, yeah, we'll take that 100 acre feet a year, build 500 homes, because we get 5 per acre foot, which is pretty good. But the reality was, there really wasn't any new water to give us. There really wasn't. We were at 14,000 acre feet. We actually had water rights for more, but that's all we were going to get as long as the governing body said we had it. And if they didn't, the idea would be that, all right, we're going to do the moratorium, no more building permits. Instead, we came up with something called a water bank. We'll talk about that in a minute too. But the point is that we went, and this graph is not showing it well, but we went from 14,000 acre feet to 9,000 acre feet in the space of a couple of years. So from 14 to 9. So we had 5,000 acre feet that we saved almost overnight at 5 homes per acre foot. We essentially bought ourselves 25,000 new homes before we ever got back up to 14,000 acre feet, which meant that we pushed back our sustainability failure point pretty considerably. Now, how do we do that? Well, the city of Santa Fe spent $1 million, and they bought 10,000 Toto toilets, 1.6 gallon Toto toilets. This was right soon after the '96 mandate for 1.6, but many people obviously did not have them because toilets don't go bad that quickly. 10,000 toilets for $1 million, and we said, first come, first serve, they're free. Anybody wants one, just come and get it. And they did. And our water consumption dropped like a rock almost overnight. You see that in that dip right there on the left-hand side. Beyond that, we also said, to continue this notion of the offset, that we're going to have a toilet retrofit program. And we are going to empower plumbers to go into the community and change out a toilet in somebody's house for free. As a matter of fact, it got so desperate to find those toilets that plumbers would knock on people's doors or leaflet their front knob and say, give us a call and we'll give you a free toilet. Well, why did they do that? Because they could take that credit and deposit it in a water bank that the city of Santa Fe had established. And that water bank had those conserved credits, and each toilet that was retrofitted was worth $300 or $400. And builders actually had to buy those credits. I'll show a slide in a minute that kind of shows that. There was an interesting slide there. And it was a map of New Mexico, and it showed the various hues at a one point in time, and these drought monitors come out monthly, and I think it was a slide from 2018, and it showed a big dark blob over the four corners, Arizona, Colorado, and Nevada, or Utah rather. And it was just that one slice of time, but it was just the state. That dark blob that was over the four corners clearly extended into all of the other states surrounding it. And the point of that is that this mega drought is independent of what is happening today or even last year. So for instance, everybody today is like, wow, we got snow in the mountains here, we're gonna run off and fill up Lake Mead. Well, maybe a little bit, and maybe this year will be a wet year, but it doesn't mean that the drought in the Southwest is over, because the blob kind of moves around like an amoeba. So one year it might be Texas, one year it might be Arizona, Nevada, Colorado. The mega drought is permanent, it's here. There's the map, and there's the dark blob. That, if we extrapolated that out into the entire Rio Grande Valley or the Colorado River Valley, we would see that that blob really extends in a lot of different areas. So, as I said earlier, at one time we were kind of like here in Nevada, we were up to 170 acre-feet per day, 170 gallons per capita per day, and we kept going down. We kept going down. This shaded area here was some emergency water restrictions that we had. You can see these drops. Here's the drops, another pretty, and then we kind of just bounced along slowly as we went along. And now we're down to 87 gallons per capita a day, and we believe we can go lower. Santa Fe's population has gone up, not much, 1% a year. Gallons per capita a day goes down, and total water use has gone down as well. The water bank. Some areas here in the Southwest have water banks. When the stormwater comes, they capture it and they inject it into the ground, a bank of water that we can take out later. That's not what Santa Fe's water bank is. It's like a bank with deposits and credits, and what it does is at the top it shows that a developer estimates the water budget. They submit it to the land use department. If it's less than 5 acre-feet, they just buy it out of the water conservation bank. If it's more than 5 or 10 acre-feet, 10 for residential, 5 for commercial, they have to go and buy wet water and transfer it to the city system. No developer wants to really do that unless they're doing quite a large scale. So we had about 5 acre-feet per, 5 houses per acre-foot. And so when we were at, you got to be under 10 to go just be able to write a check and get it out of the bank, we had a lot of 49-unit subdivisions because they could not have to go out and buy those wet water rights and go through the onerous process of transferring them. The developer pays a fee into that bank. If they need X amount of water, they pay a fee for their subdivision or their home. One of the things that we've been trying to get across is that if we can be 7 or 8 houses per acre foot, then that ease of going to the bank can be not 49 houses, but a bigger number, and developers like that notion. This has worked really well. This has worked really well for us in Santa Fe, and it has kept our home building industry viable in Santa Fe. And it really is one of these things that we believe needs to be replicated around the United States, or at least in the Southwest. Because the reality is, again, that no water is no growth, period. That's just it. And why is that? And that's because we all like to shut the door behind us. So when we move down here to the Southwest, we're like, I'm here, I got my water, and I don't really want to be more conservative so that developer can build a house for that person that just moved here. That's not my problem. We also know that we cannot fight thermoelectric to a certain extent. They need what they need. We also know that politically we can't really fight agriculture. And so the people, the industry that will be told to sacrifice will be the home building industry. And it'll basically be, can't sustain any more people in our market and the limited resources of water. And so home builders will lose that fight, as they always do. You may not think that that's true, because you may think of, well, these corporate builders, they can come in and they can lobby and they can get their way. Ultimately, as the political process goes along, the builders will be the ones who will be told, sorry, no more water. Unless we can actually push that sustainability failure point out ad infinitum. And that really is what we're trying to get across. Tomorrow I'm going back to the International Builders Show, where I will be talking to my brother builders and trying to get across to them that we in the home building industry have to lead the way on this. We have to lead the way on encouraging our governments to do the good things and pass codes upon us. And even though it will make our homes more expensive, it is something that if we do not do, we will die as an industry in the Southwest within a generation or two. A couple years ago, I was at a National Home Builders Association meeting, and a very progressive energy raider from Maryland, Montgomery County, Maryland, one of the most progressive communities in the United States, said, well, how much can a consumer really save if they cut their water consumption in half? And how much does it cost to do that? Well, the reality is it costs a lot. Capturing, putting it in a tank, treating it, pumping it, getting it back in the house is expensive. $10,000, $20,000 a house sometimes. But I asked the guy, I said, the question really isn't about how much is the consumer going to save. The question really is, how much is that next building permit worth to you as a business? How much is it worth to you as a builder to be able to continue to do what you want to do and serve that growth that is going to come to this area? And when we think about it that way, it really kind of flips it around, because it's not necessarily about what the consumer is going to drive. It really is about what we as an industry are going to do with our partners in government to be able to say, tax us, code us, mandate us, so that we can continue to survive. And I do think that it's a conversation that is beginning to resonate at the National Association of Home Builders. Ron Jones can tell you for hours about what obstinate people they can be, and they are. But we really have to get across this message here in the Southwest that as you polar vortex refugees, you climate refugees, come to a place that is usually warmer than it was today, we have to serve you. We have to be able to provide housing for you if you want to come here, because we can't stop you from coming. And so the message that I bring is that sustainability is not just about energy, as it has been for all of us for the last 20 years or more. Double net zero is a doable thing. As a matter of fact, I was so enamored with the notion of double net zero that I bought it. I bought the website, Double Net Zero, $50. Go daddy. I'm between jobs right now, so if anybody would like to make me an offer on Double Net Zero homes, we can work something out. But in the meantime, help us tell the building community that this is for their own good. And I thank you all today.